Hello and welcome back to the Antique Airshow. My name is Jared, and in today's episode, we're taking a look at the 1964 Second World War film 633 Squadron. Directed by Walter Grauman and starring Cliff Robertson and George Chakiris, 633 Squadron tells the story of a fictitious Mosquito Squadron as it prepares for a daring precision strike against a hidden German fuel factory deep in a Norwegian fjord. The plot and the characters are adapted from the second half of the 1956 novel by the same name, written by Frederick E. Smith, a former Royal Air Force officer who had served during the Second World War. When it hit cinemas in 1964, it became a box office success. And while it isn't without its flaws, 633 Squadron still remains popular among aviation enthusiasts. Often noted for its spectacular flying sequences and its rousing score by Ron Goodwin. So without further ado, let's delve into the stories behind 633 Squadron and have a look at how this classic aviation film was made. Although the film does feature prominent actors like Cliff Robertson and George Chakiris, undoubtedly the true stars of 633 Squadron are the de Havilland Mosquitos. Designed in the late 1930s by de Havilland as a fast, unarmed bomber, the Mosquito drew on experience gained from the successful DH-88 Comet racer and the late 1930s civilian airliner, the DH-91 Albatross. Made from mainly timber and plywood, the Mosquito was lightweight and fast. At first, the Air Ministry were not impressed by the new design, and it took quite some time before the Air Ministry warmed to it. Construction on the three prototypes would begin in March 1940, and after briefly being cancelled following the losses at Dunkirk, the prototype's first flight occurred at the end of November. Finally, the Mosquito entered service with the RAF during September 1941, quickly proving to be invaluable. Originally designed as a bomber, the Mosquito would become famous across a wide range of roles, from photo reconnaissance sorties to night fighter duties. It was a true multi-role aircraft. Numerous variants were developed, bomb load and range continually grew, and it earned itself the nickname the Wooden Wonder. For a design initially unwelcomed, the DH-98 Mosquito quickly proved to be one of the most significant and important aircraft in the RAF's inventory. The Mosquito's speed made it ideal for launching low-level precision strikes on high-value targets. The first of these raids occurred on September 25, 1942, when four Mosquito Mark IV bombers of No. 105 Squadron launched an attack against the Gestapo headquarters in Oslo, Norway. The raid was not overly successful, with three of the four bombs that hit the building bouncing out of the building before exploding, and the fourth failing to explode. One Mosquito was lost on the raid, and 4 civilians killed. Perhaps the most high profile of these low-level, high-precision strikes came on the 18th of February 1944, the Amiens prison raid. Mosquitoes from 21 Squadron, Royal Air Force, 464 Squadron, Royal Australian Air Force, and 487 Squadron, Royal New Zealand Air Force, of No. 140 Wing of the RAF 2nd Tactical Air Force, with cover from Royal Air Force Typhoons, were tasked with striking the prison in an effort to free resistant fighters. Attacking at a level of no more than 5 meters above the ground, Mosquitoes in No. 487 Squadron broke through the outside walls of the prison, allowing 464 Squadron to attack the buildings, particularly the guardhouse. 21 Squadron were held in reserve, their mission being to bomb the prison if the first 2 squadrons could not breach it. Thankfully, they were not required. The raid resulted in between 255 and 258 prisoners escaping, among them 50 members of the French resistance. Sadly, 102 prisoners were killed and 74 hospitalized, and of those that escaped, 182 were recaptured shortly thereafter. 2 Mosquitoes and 2 Typhoons were also shot down for the loss of 3 aircrew, while a further 3 were captured. But the raid had diverted the Germans' attention, particularly in the lead up to the Normandy landings, and importantly, those that did escape were able to identify a number of key undercover Gestapo agents. Other daring low-level missions followed for the Mosquito. Shortly after the Amiens prison attack, there was a low-level strike against an art gallery in The Hague housing critical Gestapo files, and another in October 1944, which saw number 140 Wing send 24 Mosquitoes to attack the Gestapo officers located at the University of Aarhus in Denmark. These low-level precision raids were hazardous, and at times a high price were paid by the squadrons involved. 633 Squadron began filming in 1963, using cutting-edge Panavision widescreen and colour technology. This made it the first aviation film to be shot in colour, but also meant that unlike war films before it, including the famous Dam Busters film, the production team could not rely on inserting actual footage from the Second World War. Instead, the film crew would have to shoot everything. But for director Walter Grauman, a 56 mission B-25 pilot veteran himself, shooting in colour was critical to achieving the desired result. As he stated, quote, "Speaking as both a filmmaker and a man who was there, it is a very important part of the total experience. We would take off from the comparative safety of our air bases, looking at incredibly beautiful vistas thousands of feet up there, and be facing death a few minutes later. And a few minutes after that, those who survived would be heading home again, through those same beautiful skies. The visual counterpoint was startling to us. That's why we had to make this film in colour." End quote. But there was a problem. To film in colour, they needed Mosquito aircraft. And in 1963, Mosquitoes were not particularly easy to come by. Even though variants of the Mosquito had served with the Royal Air Force until 1963, they were not easy to find. It was at this point that World War II bomber pilot, the former group captain, Hamish Mahady, was brought into the picture. Mahady had become a decorated pilot throughout the Second World War, being one of the first members of the RAF Pathfinders Force. His involvement in the Pathfinders Force had given him experience in flying Mosquitoes, and following the war, Mahady had worked procuring Lancasters for the film The Dam Busters, before retiring from the RAF in 1958. His work on 633 Squadron would kick off a distinguished career as a technical advisor in the film industry, working across no less than 15 films, including his most famous assignment, assembling the massive collection of aircraft for the 1969 epic The Battle of Britain. Mahady had been recommended to the film crew of 633 Squadron due to his previous experience flying Mosquitoes, and it was thought that if any man could find aircraft for the film, it would be him. After much searching, Mahady was able to scavenge together a mixture of either 9 or 10 Mosquitoes, sources vary, in a variety of conditions, including 5 airworthy examples. Majority of the Mosquitoes that were obtained were old target tugs, known as Mosquito TT Mark 35s, which required some modification to get them to look like late war Mosquito FB Mark 6s that would match the setting of the movie. The clear nose cones had to be painted over, as did the windows down the side of the fuselage, and dummy machine guns were fitted to the front of the aircraft. The crew were able to get their hands on one airworthy Mosquito Mark T3, which came with a solid nose, and as such only dummy machine guns were needed to be fitted. Complementing the crew of Mosquitoes, a B-25 aircraft was modified with a glass nose to be used as a camera ship, in addition to playing a small role as a B-25 in the film. German fighter aircraft throughout the film were played by 2 Nordpaguen aircraft, essentially French-built Messerschmitt Bf-108s, and a Miles Messenger was brought in for a brief appearance at the beginning of the film. The film's aerial sequences are no doubt its crowning glory. Real Mosquito aircraft rolled over the English and Scottish countryside, while model work helped achieve the illusion, particularly for the final attack scene. However, not all aircraft survived production.
Hang on, Bissell. This might be a little rough.
The crash landing sequence following the raid on the Gestapo headquarters involved deliberately crash landing and burning Mosquito TA-724. Meanwhile, Mosquito RS-718 was lost during a crash at Bovington, and it seems a third unknown Mosquito also got written off during production. Oscar-winning special effects technician Tom Howard used matte paintings, model work, and front and rear projections to achieve some of the special effects throughout 633 Squadron. One shot of 12 Mosquitoes in flight was achieved by compositing 3 shots of 4 Mosquitoes together. In a 2008 interview, director Walter Grauman elaborated on how cockpit shots were achieved. For these shots, they put a cockpit of a Mosquito up on springs, allowing the aircraft to be bounced around like it was flying. They also put an extra layer of perspex over the windshield and shot pellets at it, creating cracks in the outer shell of plexiglass. Finally, for the climax of the film, they placed a special effects fire behind the seats in the cockpit. Majority of the filming took place out of RAF Bovington in Hertfordshire, with it doubling as the fictional RAF Sutton Craddock featured in the book. Some shots of Starverton Airport, Gloucestershire also made the cut. Throughout the search for authentic aircraft, Mahadi had also been able to locate authentic equipment and vehicles, helping to create a realistic setting. Although the 1950s bright orange aircrew life jackets do stick out like a sore thumb, something that would be front and centre a few years later throughout the 1969 Battle of Britain. Filming would also take place up north in Scotland. Some scenes were shot in the Scottish Highlands near Glencoe, while most of the attack sequence was done over Loch Morar and Loch Nevis. The Lerrig Gruel Pass up in the Cairngorms was relied upon for the training flight sequences and scenes featuring the Norwegian resistance. While up in Scotland, aircraft were based at Inverness Airport. Finally, the 3 compasses located in Aldenham, Hertfordshire was utilised to shoot the pub scenes, and this pub is still in business to this day. Overall, 633 Squadron is an enjoyable and action-packed war film. Sure, it doesn't have the strongest script, and at times the acting is wooden, but the flying sequences are superb, as is Ron Goodwin's score, spurring the movie along. The movie would be popular at the cinemas, and to this day is still a favourite among many war film enthusiasts. The success of 633 Squadron would inspire the movie Mosquito Squadron of 1969, which did reuse footage from 633 Squadron. However, it is considered substantially worse. For Frederick E. Smith, he would eventually write a sequel to 633 Squadron named Operation Rhine Maiden, and this was published in 1975. A decade and a bit after its release, 633 Squadron, alongside the 1955 Dambusters film, would be important sources of inspiration for George Lucas as he created the legendary Star Wars film. Much of the final attack on the Death Star, including the famous trench run, is rather similar to the attacks performed in both these films, and it's not hard to see where Lucas got his inspiration from. And with that, that brings us to an end of this episode of the Antique Airshow. Thank you for joining me, and I hope to see you back here soon.